Hey friends, welcome to the Sample Ox Mystery Sample Challenge, where we will unravel a mystery product using our taste buds. Here's how it works. We have two guests on the program, a challenger and a category expert. Our challenger will be tasked with tasting and eventually guessing the mystery product from 3 different possible descriptions. But they won't be alone. Our expert guest, who chose the product and happens to know a lot about it, will be guiding us through the tasting and giving out clues along the way. Today, we're going to be tasting cheese, and our expert from the cheese industry is our friend, Bill Stephenson. Bill was the chair of the certification committee for the American Cheese Society and helped develop the cheese taste test. He's also on the board of Cheese Importers Association of America, and he's an education consultant for the Specialty Food Association. And those are just his volunteer posts. So thank you so much, Bill. You're a busy man. Thanks for being here.
That is my pleasure, Lindsay. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So Bill, in addition to everything you do in the cheese industry as a volunteer, your day job is as the National Category Director at DPI Specialty Foods in Portland, Oregon. To help me kind of understand what that means, what's one thing that you do in your job every week?
One thing that I do every week is read, really. I know that sounds like a kind of a thing that you would do to skip out on work, but I would say it's a very important part of what I do to stay on top of what's going on in the world of cheese as a category director, both, in terms of science innovations, but what's going on in the market and, all around the world.
Is the world of cheese kind of changing at a fast clip, or is it, I know it's like pretty traditional product. Is it changing a lot?
I mean, in the last decade, the United States has been just explosive in terms of its innovative growth with artisan cheesemakers. So just fantastic from that standpoint, and kind of difficult to keep up with. Layer onto that, not new things coming necessarily from Europe in the way of cheese, but like tariffs, for instance, that we've gotten mixed up with in terms of things going on in other countries. So yeah, there's stuff going on that you got to stay on top of.
Yeah, interesting. Well, one of the things that I noticed when I was doing my own reading about cheese in preparation for this, I found that every single article that I came across had at least one cheese pun integrated into it. So like puns like really bad ones, like "you Gouda brie kidding me," like puns on puns. So it just seems like the cheese authors just cannot help themselves. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of these puns in your reading. What's the most cringeworthy, and what's your favorite?
I mean, you're 100% right about that. There's no escaping it. We've all got to own the "who cut the cheese" kind of thing. But yeah. I would say, okay, so what do you call a cheese without eyes?
Oh boy, do tell.
Blind. Which is both true and very cringeworthy. That is what we call a cheese that should have eye formation but doesn't. It's blind.
Yeah, so maybe it's not even a pun because it is actually true.
All right, I'll get you a better one. How about did you hear about the explosion at the French cheese plant?
Oh no, I did not.
Debris was scattered everywhere.
Oh my God.
Sorry. Yeah.
Cringe away. They really hold on to brie. All right, cool. Thank you for getting us started off on the right foot, Bill. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Our guest, who will be tasked with tasting and guessing the mystery cheese, Chris Leguizamon. Chris works as the education program manager at Pure Project Brewing in San Diego, California. He is also one of a handful of advanced Cicerones and just kind of a lover of all things flavor. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Lindsay, thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Yes. So Chris, what is your level of cheese knowledge?
It's passing. So I'm super nervous. I've done a couple beer and cheese pairings. They're exciting, but honestly, it's me walking through Trader Joe's, looking at it and saying, Gruyere, let's find out what Gruyere tastes, or Manchego. It's passing, but I'm excited to just do sensory on this, and I don't know. It's good. It's good. It's passing.
Okay, it's passable.
It's passable.
All right.
It's so
You're
passable.
feeling good about your prospects. Okay. So one of the things that I know about you is you enjoy going on long road trips, tasting the flavors from different cities, meeting the people behind the foods and beverages that you enjoy. So from your travels, what is the city that you would consider to be best for pairings?
Interesting. Like, yes, like I love exploring, kind of like cheese. You want to know who makes these products. There's people behind it. There's stories behind it. One of my favorite is just going to regions in the United States, Seattle, the Pacific Northwest. They're obsessed with like barrel-aged sours, saisons. So you could do saisons from like Holy Mountain and other really great breweries with some like really cool pizza, maybe like a Scotch egg on top. There's so many like different possibilities. You're in Southern California, you're eating those, you're drinking West Coast IPAs, you're eating fish tacos, or like tacos al pastor. You're going to Florida, there's those big pastry stouts. There's just like different area and pockets that make it exciting. I would have to say, for me, you go to Seattle and you just fall in love with their saisons.
All right. That sounds good. Yeah. Holy Mountain, all those folks, good breweries all over the place. All right. So cool. Now that we know the flow and now that we know our guests, let's go ahead and get started. So let's open up our cheese. Let's take a look at it. While you're doing that, remember at the end of our full evaluation, you will be tasked with guessing our mystery cheese from 3 different descriptions, Chris. So now I'm going to go ahead and read you those descriptions so that you can keep them in your noodle during your evaluation. Okay, so which of the following best describes our mystery cheese? Is it number 1, a lightly pressed and pasteurized sheep's milk cheese with sweet, aromatic, nutty, and some toasted wheat flavors at 38% moisture and 60% FDM? More on FDM later. Or is it number 2, the pressed raw cow's milk cheese that has flavors of cooked custard and roasted nuts with a fruity finish at 34% moisture and 64% FDM? Or is it number 3, which is the uncooked and pasteurized cow, goat, and sheep's milk cheese that delivers a buttery, grassy, sweet, and herbaceous flavor at 43% moisture and 55% FDM? So just to clarify what FDM is, FDM stands for fat and dry matter. And just to simplify it, it's basically the amount of fat in the cheese minus the amount of moisture in the cheese. All right, so Chris, go ahead and get started on visual. And in the meantime, Bill, there are so many things to notice about cheese: the color, the rind pattern, crystals, the holes, which you taught me are called eyes. So can you tell us, how are these eyes formed and what do they mean for the cheese?
Eye formation, yeah. I mean, we're most used to seeing eyes in sort of that Swiss, what we call Swiss cheese, which we really have to get over because there are so many wonderful cheeses from Switzerland that what we're really referring to is pretty much everything that descends from Emmentaler and then some other varieties that have some small eye formation. But yeah, it's kind of a really cool subset of something that happens and can be sort of propagated in cheese, where it's a combination of setting up the right texture in the cheese. So it's got to be kind of elastic, the curd does, a little bit rubbery. And then you've got to sort of introduce the right kind of microorganism, these propionic bacteria, right? And so in aging, under the right conditions, these bacteria will activate, they'll consume what they consume, which is lactate, lactic acid, and they will they're gas formers. So they'll form carbon dioxide gas bubbles. So you're really looking at kind of preserved gas bubbles in that cheese. And the only way that they'll hold together in that form is if that cheese texture that you set up is correct, because otherwise that gas is just going to rip the cheese texture apart.
Interesting. Cool. That was kind of our guess. We're like, I wonder if it's just, CO2. So it's kind of a fine line to draw with like how much you let the fermentation continue. Very interesting. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, so let's go ahead and bring Chris back and hear what he sees. So Chris, what did you see? Did you see any eyes? What else did you notice about the cheese color, the rind pattern?
Yeah, definitely has, for me, a little bit of like those eyes, like a little bit of like specks, dots. That has to be what Bill was mentioning. Texturally, a little bit more on the slick side, almost oily. Outside has this cross pattern, so pretty intrigued. It's definitely a harder cheese. And I'm intrigued. It's very pale, almost straw. Towards the inside of it gets even paler, almost like an off-white, maybe eggshell, getting a little bit darker the closer it gets to the edges. Still, a lot of mystery.
Yeah, still a lot of mystery. That was probably the most thorough cheese visual explanation I have ever heard. So well done.
Yeah.
I think you're on your way to guessing correctly. So Chris, you grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, famously known for the Reading Railroad in Monopoly, which, by the way, we all thought was pronounced reading. So if you've learned nothing else today, it is not pronounced reading, it is Reading. It's quite the small town, and now you live in a large city. So when you go and travel, do you tend to choose like smaller, off the beaten path places, or do you go to larger cities?
I love city. This for me, city is like for you, Lindsay. Let's say if you go hiking, like that's the way you like expand and like relax. For me, I go inside the city. More cement, the better. I know it sounds kind of weird. One of my favorite cities was St. Louis. I went there with Candace, my lady, and then her family lives out in Highland. Small little town, maybe of like 3,000 people, really, really, really small. But I found a really awesome coffee shop that her mom never knew about in her small little town. And we went there, and just like that feeling of finding something new, exploring that small little town or big city is always something special. There's small little intricacies in small cities and big cities, but I gravitate towards the big cities. And then if I have time, let's go see what other things we can find.
I love it. So you have a knack for finding those diamonds in the rough. All right, so let's go ahead and start tasting this cheese. I can see that you really want to do it, so let's do that. So Chris, while you get started on aroma and overall flavor, so go ahead and taste it, cut it up, give it a shot. While you do that, Bill, I want to talk to you again. Bill, is there anything specific that Chris should be doing to fully evaluate the aroma and overall flavor of the cheese? Can you kind of walk us through the cheese evaluation process?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I mean, it really isn't anything that is going to be too surprising to somebody that knows and appreciates the evaluation of good beer, good wine, whiskey, what have you, right? I mean, so in the same way that you want to start with like a clean glass, that's been washed out with kind of a neutral scented detergent, so that you're starting with kind of a blank slate. Like, we're going to be using our hands to taste this cheese. So obviously you want to have clean hands, right? That's to your own benefit, but also free of detergent to the extent possible, right? So that they're not sort of coloring your perception, right? Mm-hmm. So clean hands. So that's number one. Then when it comes to the cheese itself, it is all very much, again, the same as the way you would evaluate anything else. So we're going to evaluate on the basis of appearance. And Chris did a great job already of really kind of looking for just anything that he could describe in the appearance of that cheese. Is fantastic. I would say next he should be evaluating the aroma. Mm-hmm. And one of the tricks for cheese, I mean, we've got all these tricks for how we evaluate aroma in beverages to kind of release more volatile compounds. Mm-hmm. One of the tricks with cheese is you might take a little piece of cheese and kind of work it in your fingers a little bit. I know it's not something you would normally do around the table, but what that's doing is it's not only kind of breaking the texture down of the cheese, giving you a sense of kind of what this cheese texture is like, but it's also going to warm it up a little bit more. And of course, warming it up is going to help release more volatiles. So that's a part of the aroma assessment for cheese. And so we've got appearance, we've got aroma, and we can move to flavor after that. Okay. And really kind of get that full retronasal going.
So just pop it in your mouth and let it happen.
Yeah, but savor, right? I mean, there's a tendency to really kind of sometimes gobble stuff down without thinking. But that's not, I'm sure, what Chris is going to be doing. He's going to be thinking while he is tasting this.
Yep. Awesome. So there's a lot of overlap in other products, of course. I love the smushing between your fingers. That's kind of odd, and I like it.
Pro tip.
All right. Well, hopefully that gave Chris some good tidbits, and hopefully that also gave him enough time to do his full evaluation, because we're going to go ahead and bring him back and ask Chris, what did you smell? What did you taste? What did you experience?
All right. This is absolutely wild. First off, Bill, when you mentioned about like crumbling, never done that before. And also I'm glad that the camera wasn't on me, because I was like, so when it was dry without the rubs, it almost had this like really cool, like nutty toasted almond, just dry almond characteristic. There was some grassy, subtle, oniony type of aroma. But the second you start just kind of like kneading it down, bring it up to the nose, there's like overtly like sweet like aroma, not in sweet as honey, but sweet like maja blanco, which is like a really I think it's actually goat caramel, if I'm not mistaken, but just this like soft, sweet, almost like funky type of aroma. On the taste, on the palate, it was fairly neutral, and then like you get those like big, intense, like nutty, almost cashew almond. There's this like really cool funkiness behind it. Almost like crystals a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's
cool.
Lindsay, are you gonna be eating this, or is it just?
I mean, I'm just blown away with what you're doing. I don't think I feel like I'm tasting it by just hearing you talking about it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that was really great. I am going to open it, and I will take a couple bites. But I actually have another question that I'm thinking about. So Bill, butyric acid.
Yeah.
It's a commonly found flavor compound in a lot of cheeses, and smelled on its own, it's rather unpleasant. It's like kind of body odor-esque, some other nasty stuff. So can you tell us the role that butyric acid plays in the aroma profiles of cheeses, and what we would experience if it wasn't there?
Right. Yeah. And to be clear, I don't think we're saying that we're getting it much out of this one,
Right.
but it is something that you would naturally find present in a lot of different cheeses, but mostly at levels below threshold. So it is just a fatty acid, a sort of a short carbon fatty acid. And so when you get enough of it so that it's sort of up above threshold, then you begin to really perceive it. And as you say, it's got a characteristic that's kind of borderline bile, kind of vomit, or I mean, it's a very distinct and somewhat off-putting aroma, but yet it still actually has kind of a starring role in some cheeses. So the next time you are tasting like what would be described as a very sharp provolone, that would be an aged provolone, or a pecorino romano, a very hard cheese, but when you grate it up, you can really get some of those aromas. You're going to be smelling the presence of butyric acid predominantly. Yeah.
Cool. Very fun. So Chris, butyric acid in the beer world is, often kind of seen as a flaw, but at low levels, it can be a key characteristic in some styles. Would you pair a butyric cheese with a butyric beer, or would you want to kind of contrast those two things?
It's so interesting because, and this is the best part about food and beer, is sometimes those two, like sweet and sweet, kind of like cancel each other out, or different types of flavors cancel each other out. So possibly you might either get some cancellation, or they just heighten this and you're like, oh my God, this was the worst idea possible. I would not pair butyric with butyric, vomit with vomit, like pairing, but you could kind of play off of that and like introduce like a peppery saison, or like sometimes like lactic acid, just to even brighten up the whole heaviness of a vomit-like funky type of flavor. I wouldn't pair butyric with butyric acid.
Whew, man, this is sounding really delicious. This is sensory science, y'all. All right, so Chris, let's go ahead and move on to mouthfeel while we're while we're moving along. And while we do that, Bill, let's chat again. All right, so Bill, we worked on creating the cheese flavor map together, and I was surprised at how much of our attention in creating this common lexicon was devoted to the mouthfeel section. So, Bill, I want to play a game. I'll throw out a mouthfeel term, and you name a cheese that best represents that mouthfeel. Are you ready? We're going to do this. All right. Okay, let's do this. Crumbly.
Cotija. Cotija, you know, a lot of the Hispanic cheeses, cheeses that we've got from Mexico are quite crumbly. So even a queso blanco could be quite crumbly.
Okay. Springy.
Springy. Okay, so maybe the best example I can think of would be like a fresh, high moisture mozzarella. So those are pasta filata cheeses, and they bring back.
Great. Sticky.
So sticky for me is ooey gooey. You know, so like a washed rind cheese, for instance, might be a good sticky cheese, both inside as it's where it's ooey gooey and on the rind as well.
Okay.
Like a poisse, for instance.
Okay. And we'll do our last one, coating.
Coating, like mouth coating. So like a good mouth coating cheese, I think would be sometimes a chèvre could be a nice mouth coating cheese. For sure. You really get that presence all over your mouth.
Great. All right. We have a lot of cheese tasting to do in our future to get all of those different mouthfeel sensations. All right. Let's go ahead and bring Chris back and see what he came up with for mouthfeel. So, Chris, did you feel any of those mouthfeels that we just listed?
A couple, like somewhere like in between. This is so fun because it's not beer and I'm trying really hard.
You're doing awesome.
Yeah, right? And Bill, I believe you have a background in beer as well.
Yeah.
So it definitely has like a crumbling effect, of course, a little bit of a stiffer one. But the second it goes on your palate and like the heat of your tongue starts like melting it, it turns almost, I'm not gonna say buttery, but just like softens off really nicely. There's a couple like texturally gritty areas, but I would go crumbly-ish / like not buttery, but softens out. I don't know. Bill, help me out.
Yeah. I don't need to. I don't need to. You are doing great.
Yeah, you hit it. I got some of the like the crumbly and like the kind of crunchy stuff in there too. Kind of fun. All right. So now that we've done our full evaluation, we are at the time where we can put this all together and guess which of the three descriptions best matches the flavor of the cheese that we just described. Is it number one, the lightly pressed and pasteurized sheep's milk cheese with sweet, aromatic, nutty, and some toasted wheat flavors at 38% moisture and 60% FDM? Or is it number two, the pressed raw cow's milk cheese that has flavors of cooked custard and roasted nuts with a fruity finish at 34% moisture and 64% FDM? Or is it the number three, uncooked and pasteurized cow, goat, and sheep's milk cheese that delivers buttery, grassy, sweet, and herbaceous notes at 43% moisture and 55% FDM? So, Chris, on a 0 to 10 point scale, I want to know, how confident are you that you know what you're tasting?
I'm pretty confident on what I'm tasting, but I love the overlap between these options. And you're just like, I'm 70% confident in what I'm going to choose.
We'll call it a 7. Yeah, I mean, we're really splitting hairs here with a couple of these, so hopefully it's a little hard. Okay, so now for the moment that we've all been waiting for, Chris, what's your guess and why?
You caught me chewing. All right. This one, and it's tough because like I'm looking at the moisture content. There's a little bit of a slickness. There's a lot of like fattiness the second like you start transferring some heat. So there is some fairly high FDM, but they're all in the same range. Nothing's really splitting apart. In my experience, I find that both goat and sheep have a little bit more like deeper flavors, more like complexity to them. Not to like say that cows don't. So I'm kind of leaning between A and C because I find this to be pretty complex. There is a butteriness to it. There's a grassiness. There's a sweetness. There's a herbaceous. Lindsay, are you also gonna guess as well?
I know what it is.
Okay. Bill, don't make fun of me if I get it wrong. I am gonna go with. I'm so torn between because there's a nuttiness to it, so I want to say A, but there's that sweet, grassy, buttery. Actually, I'm gonna pull it. I'm gonna go A.
He's going A. All right, Bill, reveal the mystery cheese. Tell us about it.
I mean, I could not have done a better job describing that cheese, and you nailed it. So that is exactly what it is. And yeah, there was some overlap in those descriptions, but there were a few things that you could potentially kind of pull out of there that maybe you weren't paying as close attention to. So the lightly pressed comment, those little eyes that you're seeing, it's actually not an eye formation. It's because they don't press it together very firmly. So it's what's called a mechanical opening. So it's that light pressing there. And the color of it is not very much cow's milk. It's a little bit more sheep's milk. The flavors are a little bit more sheep's milk, like you suggested. And goat's milk usually gives you a little bit more of a white hue, even in a blended cheese. So there were some additional cues in there, but yeah, you nailed it. So that cheese is an Osso Irati. Osso Irati. Ossauiraty. Specifically, this one is called Escarou. And that's a brand. This is a French sheep's milk cheese from the Pyrenees. It's one of the classics. It's a name-controlled cheese, so it's got a protected designation of origin. They've been making it in the Pyrenees for millennia, as far as we know. It comes from I think it's the Manchega breed of sheep, and it is just, as long as I've been kind of in the professional cheese community, it's long been a favorite of your average cheesemonger because it's just such a lovely eating cheese and it pairs so well with so many different things. It's a stalwart. And this one in particular was recognized among many other cheeses in 2018 as kind of the World Championship cheese of the year in the Wisconsin World Championship Cheese Contest. So definitely a worthy distinction to go with this cheese. Well done.
Yeah, well done indeed. Yeah, so speaking of Wisconsin, Bill, as we wrap up, let's plan Chris's next cheese trip. We all know, famous cheese cities like Madison, but where's the most underrated cheese city in the US and what would he find there?
Oh man, I would get in trouble if I called out a particular city. Like, you know what though, I could call out a whole state because everybody knows, I'm sure you know too, that the state of Vermont punches well above its weight in the world of cheese. It is a small little state in the Northeast Kingdom that has some of the most exciting, incredible cheeses that this country is producing today. So from the cellars of Jasper Hill to Springbrook Farm, I mean, just incredible stuff. So let's go to Vermont, Chris. Bike tours, if you're into biking, like that's the place to go.
Bill, absolutely down. Lindsay, you're coming along with us. We're gonna eat cheese, we're gonna drink beer, and Vermont makes some really great beer. So yeah, I'm excited.
So Chris, what beer would you pair with this cheese?
First off, this cheese is absolutely fantastic. Hopefully all the people tuning in wrote that down. I love the almost like nutty, like you said, a little bit like toasted wheat. I would go, typically you want to go region with region, terroir with terroir, knowing that this is now a French cheese. I would go with one of the very few French styles of beer, a bière de garde. It has this awesome. It's a Saison, a little bit darker, has more of like malt characteristic coming through. So it just adds in, lets those like different sheep complexities shine through. There's a little bit of a peppery, a little bit of like black peppercorn characteristic on the tail end. Nice carbonation, kind of cuts through a little bit of the fat. Beer to guard with this, show-stopping.
Yeah.
Absolutely show-stopping.
I'm sold.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite styles. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Chris and Bill, you guys were amazing. I learned a lot, and it was really fun to see Chris squirm there at the end.
No need. No need.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sign us off. Chris has a bunch of articles coming out in the San Diego Beer News pretty soon. He's also going to be presenting at the CCBA Spring Conference April 19th and 20th. And you can always catch him behind the bar at Pure Project. If you find yourself in San Diego, go say what's up to him, and be sure to follow him on Instagram at Chris the Beer Educator. He is always putting out some really cool content, and he's definitely a human to watch. And also be sure to check out some of the projects that are near and dear to Bill's heart. The Net Zero Dairy Initiative, where participating U.S. dairies are demonstrating the ability to achieve zero greenhouse gas emissions within 5 years, which is pretty impressive. He's also involved in the ACE Foundation, which is the charitable arm of the American Cheese Society. They fund education, scholarships, research. And of course, make sure to support your local cheesemakers and brewers, of course. And for all of you at home, to continue developing your palate and engaging with experts and your community, download the Sample Ox app in the App Store today, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more of this kind of content. And of course, follow us on all of our social media channels at sample_ox. Thanks again for being here, and happy tasting.